The Abbey. So I grew up in Chicago, and we used to go up to Lake Geneva for family vacations every once in a while.
Oh
And
yeah,
we would stay at the Abbey.
That's awesome.
We thought it was like the fanciest
in
thing
the
in the
summer.
world.
It's like everybody from Chicago is up here. It's really nice.
Yeah. Did you ever go on those? They have like the boat mailman boat tours.
Yeah, the mailboat. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had several of my friends in high school that was like their summer job, is they would do the mailboat. And then it's funny because they got it, some of those mailboxes are way up at the house. So they got to sprint full speed from the boat and like make it back. And sometimes they'll leap for it and they'll miss the boat. The boat has to come around and get them out of the water.
Right. You should tell Mishti what the mailboat is we're talking about. Little insider Lake Geneva knowledge.
Like, oh yeah, so where I grew up, it's the lake itself is about 24 miles around, and it's a bunch of just like obviously it's newer now, but a lot of like older estates. So you have like the Wrigley family, the Maytag family, all these like wealthy families from Chicago. But anyways, how they get their mail in the summer is they have their mailbox on their pier. And so all summer long, there's a mailboat that goes around and delivers your mail by water to the mailbox on your pier. But like I said, some of them for whatever reason they leave the mailbox up by their house. So then it's these like high school kids. They jump off the boat and they have to like sprint as the boat is still moving and get back.
So, oh my god!
Yeah. And it's like a tourist.
They do it as like a tour. Yeah. So you can pay. And they're like talking you through the history of the different houses and stuff like that.
Because I've been on the tour where we ride on the boat and watch these people running off with mail and trying to jump back on in time.
Exactly.
Wow.
That's funny. So you grew up there in Lake Geneva?
Yep. Yeah. I grew up here in Lake Geneva, and then up until a few years ago when I joined Future, I was kind of more or less always in the Midwest, because I lived in Chicago for 4 years while I was working for the Bulls, and then spent 7 years in Indiana with Purdue. And then so, going to San Francisco was a little bit of a culture shock for me, just like being so far away from the Midwest. But
so how did you get connected to San Francisco?
What's that?
Oh, go ahead.
Were you also an athlete? Were you a college athlete as well? Did you play a lot of sports growing up?
I played basketball basically my whole life growing up, but I was always I was a lot better in my head than what I actually was in reality. So that was kind of like what led me down my path was like growing up nearby Chicago in the Jordan era. Like my dream always, and like you couldn't tell me any different, was like I was going to play for the Bulls one day. But for me, like fortunately I kind of at least had a backup plan of, if maybe by chance I don't make it, like, how can I get there another way? So that's kind of what led me into my career. But no, I didn't. I just played in high school, intramural all-star in college. That's about the extent of it.
That's awesome. I mean, sometimes like that's the best mentality for like the best coaches often are like these deep fans of the game, but also know how to like take a step back.
Yeah, exactly. I think you see that a lot, especially, because like I said, I worked in the NBA for 4 years, high level college for 7. And you see that where there's these like unbelievable former players, but it's so hard for them to coach others because so many of the things they did, not that they didn't work at it, but it was like so many things just came so natural to them. Yeah. So for other players where like they struggle to get it, some of those more talented former players really have a hard time being able to convey like how to do it because they couldn't explain how they did it themselves.
Yeah.
Are those things typically more like a certain type of like muscular coordination or something about like a strategic like game plan, or does it sort of vary across people?
Yeah.
What kinds of expertise they might have?
Well, I think, especially in basketball, there's some former players and even current players. You'll see it even with players on your team where they're just so talented that they can get by, even going to a lot of their weaknesses. Or it's like it's less efficient for them to go to that weakness, but they're just so superior in their talent and their ability that they can still get by. Whereas kind of your more typical player has to really sort of put their game in a box and really play to their strengths, you know? So it's like, what are the things that are quote unquote like your superpower, and just do that. Whereas like the really talented players, they might have a few different superpowers, but even still the things that are not, they can still get by. So I think it's hard for them to like at times they might not have to be as strategic in how they approach the game and how they think about like in basketball, maybe where their shots are going to come from, or what they need to do to kind of stay out of or stay away from some of their weaknesses.
So I've heard that same kind of pattern apply in kind of the startup world, where people either, you have some sort of outlier talent, just double down on that, versus like trying to get somewhat good at everything. So I think there's some parallels, but I wonder, if you had like a kid who wanted to play and he was really good at one thing, would your advice be like double down on your strength and just become world class at that one and ignore the rest? Or would you sort of advise to try to get, better at kind of improve your weaknesses?
I think to me, it's all relative to kind of where you are in the process, whether, with a sport, how far down that path are you already? Obviously with a startup, how far into it are you? How far in your career are you? I'm big on, and I'm sure you guys have probably read David Epstein's book, Range, but kind of the idea of, especially earlier on, so from a career standpoint, maybe say throughout your 20s, you're really kind of sampling a lot of different things, because I don't think you have enough experience to know just yet, like even what your superpowers could be, what you're sort of passionate about, what you're uniquely, kind of talented at. And so I think the same thing applies for especially athletes and growing up is that's where you see, I think there are the anecdotal stories of, say, like Tiger Woods, which become overly popularized of, he picked up a golf club when he was 6 months old, or, whatever it is. So we hear that and we think like, oh, specialize. But I think the majority of, again, from my experience in coaching, was all these NBA guys, all these, high level Division I athletes that I trained, they grew up and they played a whole range of sports. And so I think through that, they developed a lot of complementary skills. Like in basketball, you'll see maybe kids who played soccer, where just like their footwork, like there's things that they do that other kids that only focus on basketball don't quite do, or it doesn't come as naturally, or kids that played football just have a different kind of toughness when it comes to the physicality of the game. So to me, I think it's like you have to go through that sampling period, and even the level of like, especially earlier on, and like Angela Duckworth has a ton of work on this, which I'm sure you've also read, like all her work on grit. But the idea of like earlier on, you got to stick with some things as well, because it's like in your first month or few months or whatever, it's probably, especially if it's something new, you're going to be failing at it, consistently. And so that's going to be really uncomfortable. And I think automatically we're inclined to just walk away, be like, oh, I tried it, it was no fun, or I'm no good at it, or whatever. But you really didn't give it enough time. And I know that was something that I felt for myself in making the jump from being in high level basketball to the startup world with Future. And fortunately I had several like really strong, mentors in that advising me, but like I kind of made a commitment that no matter what, no matter how much I fail, how low it could all get, I have to make it 1 year, no matter what, because short of that is just, it's not enough time. And then, I think with 1 year, now you see maybe it didn't work out, or maybe as much as I tried, I just, it wasn't the right fit, or I didn't develop the skills in time.
Right.
But without that mentality, I know for me, like, I mean, shoot, even in the first few months, just being in this entirely new world and truly so much is thrown at you, you're failing left and right. The easiest thing, especially for me, the easiest thing would have been like, I could have gone and got an MBA job, tomorrow, and it would have been comfortable. It would have been easy. But I don't think you stretch and grow that way.
Right. Yeah. Great. So, I know we kind of just got thrust right in because we were talking about stuff, but I figured maybe I can give you a little bit of what's all going on here, kind of just give you a little structure on this, and then, explanations. I don't know how much Ray told you. And then
he just real quick was like, hop on this call, let's jam. I was like, okay. I was like, anything I should prepare for? He was like, no, just tell your story.
Yeah, perfect. That's about right. So yeah, and we'd love to kind of hear the future story. Just for a little bit of context, we're building this tool which helps us create videos together, and we've been doing this maybe closing in on almost a year maybe.
Wow,
where we're trying to create shows. We're mostly like interviewing authors, and now we sort of built this generalized tool to serve this use case, and so we're starting to figure out how we want to use it more in the world. And so one of the things we started doing is Mishti came up with this idea last week. She's like, let's just have lunch break, and we'll just hop in and we'll read Twitter and we'll invite interesting people that we know, and we'll just talk about whatever we feel like. It gives us a way to sort of exercise using this tool we've been building for so long. So I was actually, Ray came on last week. He just like,
oh, that's awesome to go back and watch.
Yeah, actually, Mishti sent out some tweets that you can actually catch the highlights. So the idea of highlighter, right, is that you can actually we can sit around here and we can kind of talk about whatever we feel like. And some parts are going to be good, some parts not so good. That's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
But then we can create the highlights of the great moments, and then we can share it out, put it on Twitter, put it wherever. So
very cool.
So that's kind of the core idea of what we're trying to do here. Is like, so my point is, don't feel like you're under pressure on a TV show right now, right? It's more just, we're going to hang out and talk. Cool. And if we stumble, if we just like, want to rephrase something, don't worry about it. It's fine. And then we'll create highlights that are like the best moments and the cool parts of the story.
Awesome.
And that's kind of what it's all about. We're just here to have fun. No pressure, no stress.
That's awesome. It's really cool. I mean, like, I played around on the website real quickly when Ray sent me the link, and just kind of the general idea seems like something that could be super valuable, and definitely I see a strong need for something like this.
Oh, cool! Thank you. Yeah, we're excited to keep pushing on it. So
awesome,
cool. So. And actually you can see in the chat there, I don't know if you're on the chat interface on the right, but there's a link to the Twitter thing, so you don't have to watch it now, but
awesome.
you can watch Ray and make fun of him.
I'll take notes.
So future. So, I think obviously we got connected through Ray. And I feel like I've heard the name Future from Ray for at least a year or two or so. Is that you guys have been sort of brewing for a little bit?
A little over 3 years now.
A little over 3 years.
And I joined coming up on 3 years. So I joined shortly after, maybe like 6 or 9 months after we had raised our seed round, which was still like just kind of because Ray is actually very close and has kind of been a mentor to our CEO, Rishi Mandal, for several years before this. But with those types of, relationships and everything, especially Rishi had done before, and Justin, our CTO, and Andrew, who was our founding COO at the time, they were able to raise that seed round really on the strength of that team and kind of the idea they had. But it was still, the point I joined, it was still very much like in its inception of like, okay, we have a good idea, but we got to go like build it and figure out how it works. So.
Right. And so how did you were coming from the actual team and sports and training side, right? And so
yep.
how did you actually, before we do that, do you want to just give us like an overview of what is Future?
Yeah, definitely. So Future, I think probably the best way to describe what it looks like right now today is, it's one-on-one personalized training with a really high level performance coach, personal trainer who's literally right there, essentially in your pocket, kind of building a relationship with you, checking in on you every single day before you work out, following up after your workouts, and building all of your workouts and adjusting them and all of that entirely custom, and bespoke to you and your goals and your life and all those sorts of things. So it's whereas some of these others like a Peloton or that where they have their content and really high level, very high quality content. The difference there is even when it's live, that coach or instructor doesn't actually know you. They're not speaking to you. They don't, none of that.
Mm-hmm.
Where the difference for us, that's kind of one-to-many or one-to-one. So, you actually have FaceTime calls with your coach. Actually a lot of things about your coach. They know a lot of things about your life. And, I think that's the big thing for us is we believe it's the relationship that can really be the differentiator for kind of the vast majority of us who really struggle to stay active on a consistent basis. And that's kind of the origin of the company was how do we solve this larger problem of, 70% of our country is obese or overweight, 80% are not active enough or at all. And when you really look at the problem in depth, again, there's all these amazing companies and brands like Peloton and amazing coaches and great content everywhere. There's not a shortage of available content and good information in that. But there is this missing piece of the human connection. And when you look at it, and this is what we're working to build, is when you look at, who are the people that have solved this problem of, managing their day-to-day health, you look at and you find very quickly it's billionaires and it's, elite athletes, professional athletes, Olympians. And when you look at, what have they done to manage it, every single one of them that gives a crap about it is overwhelmingly successful. And the reason for that is because they literally outsource every aspect of it. And so for them, it's, like I said, today we're the one-to-one, personal coaching and all that. For them, it even goes beyond that. They have their own, not just a dietitian, they have a chef who literally gets to know their taste preferences, what they need on, and they literally cook it, set it down in front of them. Mental performance coach, they have their, physical therapist, they have, sleep recovery specialists. They have this whole team or, sort of constellation of experts that are surrounding them who, more than just setting the path for them, they're really taking an active interest in their lives, building genuine, authentic, relationships and connections with them, which I think allows them to then bring in kind of that art of coaching to, ride those highs and lows of, that.
Oops, we got
we've kind of, that's what we've kind of really indexed on is that personal relationship. Whereas say something like, Peloton, if you stop working out, nobody's checking in on you, or if it did, it would be some like robot type email. Here is something where, if all of a sudden life gets crazy, your coach is going to be checking in with you and not transactionally to be like, hey, you're not working out. Like, what's up? But like, hey, how are you? How can I help you? Those sorts of things. Having is, we start to ladder up over time into those other areas of your health as we kind of earn that right.
So does it start with somebody who might, like with the typical customer or client, be somebody who would already be working with kind of a physical trainer, like a little bit more of the serious type of recreational athlete, or how should we think about the customer type?
Say that.
Oh, are we losing some connection here?
Can you say better?
Okay.
Can you say that again?
Sure. So yeah, I was trying to imagine, because I think you're talking about sort of the way that there's a new market maybe emerging around how certain people who, I mean, there's certainly the obese crowd that you could serve at some point, and then there's like the elite athlete crowd. And do you pick sort of, I would guess they have sort of different needs to start with. So do you pick like one particular target customer that you want to serve early on to make this work?
Oh. Hang on, I'm gonna try and.
Maybe hotspot.
Sorry about that.
Is there, do you think, a internet connectivity situation?
I think it was just jumping out there for a second. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
Evan?
So yeah, I was just I was asking, is there a certain, you think about the elite athlete all the way to the obese person, and kind of for initial target kind of customer, do you imagine it's sort of one or the other of those, or somewhere in the middle, or how do you think about kind of the initial customer you want to serve?
Who the initial customer is. Obviously early on, it's a lot of your early adopters and experimenting and kind of riding some of the growing pains with us as we build out the platform. Mm-hmm. But really, I think this is something that I talk with our coaching team about all the time. Is the reason why we exist ultimately is to be able to fill this void and serve the 80% of our country that nothing else has worked for. And I think it's a huge, it's a big opportunity, but within that, it's a huge challenge, because all of these incredibly smart people and really, really great companies have all worked to solve this problem. And yet, they're already working out, or maybe they're at kind of a higher level. I think with them, we exist to take them to kind of their next level. But, at the same time, to an extent, those 20% of the population would be fine whether we exist or we don't. Right. They're probably a bit more self-motivated, and or they kind of have their routine, or whatever it is, or they're going to use any number of other great platforms. And so for us, it's really working on that 80% where I think the challenge becomes on the coaching side that much more of like kind of how relentless you need to be at times, because you're going to try a bunch of different ways, say with a client, to help them along and help build a routine. And then something crazy is going to happen with life. Like they're going to move, they're going to, something happens with their job. They, all of a sudden have their first kid, and their routine gets thrown out of whack. Mm-hmm. And now like you got to be resourceful and come up with new strategies and new ways and to support them and to fit, them being active and healthy into their lives, which again, I think you can only do through building that relationship piece.
Right. So it sounds like
that kind of answer your question.
Yeah. So it sounds like you want to focus on people who are a little bit more the self-motivated type, and they're maybe interested in experimenting, kind of the early adopter types who would be kind of patient customers while you kind of get some of the kinks worked out. Is that?
No. So sorry, I'll walk that back. I would say like in the very early stage, like when I very first joined. When we were still like, this was sort of the history of it. When we were still in beta, it was a bit of that. But I would say now where we are, I would say, overwhelmingly our customer base does fall in that subset of people where, truly nothing else has worked for them,
Right.
and I think that's probably one of the most rewarding things is like we have we have a wins channel in Slack for our company. And it's amazing to see that channel blow up every single day with like stuff that, our clients are telling their coach directly, or they're emailing in, to talk about. Like we had a client, I think it was on Friday, who emailed me, just like this super long email raving about how appreciative she was. And she was like, you guys, and she's giving her credit to her coach specifically, but she's like, you guys have like literally saved my marriage. And you're like, holy crap. Like, that's incredible. And so I think, but it probably took that time, early on of like any new, kind of product, you're still building the tools, the technology, and for us in particular, it was like, how do we build out the playbooks of how you do this, how you think about kind of supporting another human being at scale? Because at first, it was me, and then I'd hired maybe to start out, call it like 10-ish coaches, but it was all people that like had worked with me in the past or had come from under some of my mentors. So also just sort of by default, they were going to do a great job regardless of how much direction we gave them. But as you can imagine, as we start to get into a world where we have hundreds of coaches and then one day thousands of coaches, it's like, that process to which really was the last, I would call it like year and a half, to really build out our playbooks, operationalize all our processes, build out kind of our management structure and our feedback loops, to make sure like all these things that we know when we execute on, they work for that other person to support them. And really for us, it's kind of centered around what the best in the world in hospitality, how do they think about delivering experiences for another person, which for even really high level coaches and trainers is a new way of doing things. It's a new way of thinking about things. But once you kind of break it down for them and you explain it to them, it really clicks for them. And it's a bit of a game changer because you actually don't see it in that world. Like intuitively, some people will do it, but with the level of intention that we think about it, of again, how we kind of build a path for success for you, how we take an active interest in your life, how we make sure that on our side, we're always authentic, things like that.
One thing I think is that, like, I have a lot of friends working on different parts of basically like fitness and health and holistic health. And one issue that a lot of people talk about is that it's very difficult to get someone mentally to like think about paying for the most important thing in your life, like your health, the same amount as you might pay for a couple dinners out. But then all of a sudden when it's like an app or a meal kit subscription or something, it's psychologically almost difficult to put someone in that mindset. When they're in it, I'm sure they see so much benefit, like these amazing stories you're getting back from people. How are you thinking about that, like initial kind of psychological, cultural barrier to really investing in your own health preventative?
I think honestly, that's a big one for us, and really top of mind, especially right now, because I think now for the first time in the history of our company, we've sort of earned the right to enter this like growth stage of our company. We raised our Series B at the beginning of the fall, and before that point, before having all these resources, the thing that I think we did a really great job of was being very kind of disciplined about sort of crawling before we walk, walking before we run type of thing. So really building that strong infrastructure to support the growth when we earn the right for that. And so right now we're kind of firmly in that. And that's what we're trying to figure out is how do we, especially in the short attention spans, as you guys both know, that people have, of like, how do we convey the story? And I think that's what it is like, it's the, client stories, the client journeys of people that have now been with us for a while, and the impact it's had on their lives, the problem in their life that they had before Future, and then with Future, what happened to now kind of, have this, not epiphany, but, to provide the solution to their problem and make that relatable to others is like, I think one, telling that story. I think another one is like just reducing the sort of barrier to entry, or the friction up front. So, we've experimented quite a bit with, one thing is by far our most effective distribution channel to date has been referrals, as you could probably imagine. But it's like, we get these people who, one way or another, they come on board. They first and foremost develop a strong affinity to their coach. And then out of that, they have success and they feel supported and they love it. And so what's interesting is right now, our clients, they themselves don't actually necessarily benefit when they refer someone else. And we're working on that. We're working on how do we create community and all these other things. But right now, they literally just share with, like friends and family, because they're like, this has been so helpful to me. Like, I want to give this to someone else. And so we've tapped into that with what we call guest passes, where we make it a little bit of a scarcity. It's not unlimited, because also you want to be thoughtful with who you give it to, that they would actually find value from it, and they'll use it. But with that guest pass, then it gives that other person 1 month free. So I think that's our most effective way in, because it's sort of a warm intro, and hey, it's free. Even if you don't like it at the end of the month, just quit, and at least you got a month of workouts and maybe learn some things. And then we've experimented more broadly of, free trials through some of our different paid channels and stuff like that. Again, I think that reduces the barrier of entry, but then really within that first month, you have to show the value. I think it's even, and you see this with high level athletes as well, is you have to make the connection for them. I always use an example of like, say prioritizing your sleep. Like, every single one of us understands that, like, if we really focus on sleep, we get good quality sleep, we sleep enough hours, we function better, we feel better. Like, all of this is like, it doesn't take reading all these books to understand that. But yet, like, we continue, all of us, or a lot of us, continue to rationalize and say, oh, like, if I get 6 hours, I'll be fine. If I get, but then over time, something like that, it's like, if I get 6 hours every single night for 2 weeks straight, all the research will show that now I'm actually functioning the equivalent of if I went, I believe it's close to like 48 hours without sleep, but our bodies just renorm to the day before. So we don't renorm versus 2 weeks ago. We just feel the day before. And so, like, using that as an example, something I would always do with athletes and clients is I would have them focus in on their sleep, say for 2 days or 3 days. And I would force them to, like, I would ask very specific questions about how they felt, how they were functioning, how, like, sharp-witted they were, how reactive, all these things, to force them to make that connection where now they start to identify, sort of the value. And I think that's a little bit of a microcosm of then what we try to do is, and part of it for us is sort of collecting and connecting dots with our clients, both in terms of getting to know them, but also, like, what are their, what are kind of their challenges, their blockers, what are their needs, identifying those things, and then connecting for them on those things to insert, stuff that will help them along. but to constantly be celebrating their progress along the way and to identify it to changes they've made, efforts just have, but then we're also very thoughtful of like towards the end of your first month, let's hop on a check-in call together. And now we're going to go on that call and like share with you all of the like incredible progress you've made only just in 1 month time. Because I think a lot of times if you don't identify and make some of those connections and get the other person to see it, then like you're absolutely right. You take it for granted. And, you know, like for us, for instance, it's $150 a month. You know, people feel that. So, you know, I think we also take a lot of pride in, we also don't want to like hide that from people, that like we're not one of these services that you like set it and forget it. Like we remind you 5 days before we bill you. And as soon as that we're about to, and as soon as we bill you, we send you a receipt right away. Because I think for us too, if you're not feeling that value from it, then that's on us. There's something that we're not executing on, and you know, you got to get better there.
So I wonder, you know, a lot of times with new technologies or kind of technology approaches to services that may exist and, you know, have a parallel in the, you know, physical world, you know, oftentimes there's some major, you know, vector along like, you know, faster, better, cheaper somehow. And I wonder, do you think about a specific value prop around like, we want to be, you know, it's $150 a month where people would otherwise in person be paying $450 or $500. So are you kind of on the cheaper, or are you sort of like we're better because it's more convenient and, you know, it's easier to access? And so how do you think about prioritizing across those value props?
I think it's really interesting because again, it's sort of a psychological thing. It's like what are people anchoring on? And I think what was interesting is like before the pandemic, you know, we always talked about, you know, $5 a day, $150 a month. Like if you went in person for personal training in a major city, $150 might be one session, you know, at best two, but even in smaller communities, it's probably $50 a session, $40 to $50 a session is the cheapest you'll find. So like even compared to smaller communities, when you can get that's, you know, 2 to 3 sessions anywhere else. And I think before the pandemic, people were going to gyms. So that was kind of an anchor that made sense. And then all of a sudden, you know, overnight, all the gyms shut down, and this like at home on demand fitness really like, which was coming within probably 3 to 5 years anyways, all of a sudden was here overnight. And so, you know, to me, I think what we saw was there was a bit of a shift into what the anchor now was, because now it's like, well, you know, I can get maybe Peloton on demand, I think is maybe like $20 a month. Active is maybe 15 or something like that. And so I think at that point, you know, we really had to be that much more thoughtful. And again, this is what we were talking about earlier with kind of the power of storytelling of, you know, what is the value that we're bringing, you know, because of that one-to-one, you know, human connection, the personal relationship. What is the value? Because like with us, you actually stick to your workout plan and you actually work out more than you would otherwise versus, you can pay, you know, $20 a month. But again, as we've seen with 80% of our population, at some point, it's no longer going to work for you. And you might still be paying the $20 a month, but, you know, you're not working out. So I think the big thing for us is just like doubling down on where we were going already, but trying to make it that much better. And I think one of the things that we talk about a ton internally is making sure that we're not missing on the small details, because that's the piece that really, really sets us apart is when our clients, and it's not just like obviously through the kind of technology of how they interact with our app, but it's just the relationship in general. Like every piece of feedback that our client gives us, whether it's like, you know, something they share vocally or something they do. Because like, for instance, with their workouts, like if they miss the day, that's something they did. Like they missed the day. That's kind of a detail. If they did a workout, but maybe they skipped some exercises in there, you know, or what their heart rate did, or all these things are details that we have to pick up on, because it's an investment that that person, that client has made in, you know, as part of the $150 a month that they're spending with us. When you look at the science of like habit loops, and that habit loop only works is when they come back around and kind of their next interaction, their experience continually gets better. It continually gets more custom, more specific to them, because of all those small details that we're picking up on, and we're adjusting our communication style with a client. Maybe
is that happening through? And is that happening like through, like if I'm working out with Future, I'm using a mobile app where it has some sort of prescribed workout that I'm supposed to do that was customized to me. Then I'm giving feedback saying, yes, I did this. No, I didn't do that. Maybe there's some other feedback mechanisms that are used. Is that? And then separately, there's a call or a chat with somebody.
Yeah. So the workouts themselves, your coach builds those out for you week by week. So every week on Sunday, you'll see your new week of or your upcoming week of workouts. And again, we do that because obviously life is hectic. Like typically 1 week is not like the next. Maybe you're traveling, maybe you have a bunch of business meetings, or, you know, if you're in school, you're studying for exams, whatever it is. So we're adjusting, you know, week by week. Then the workouts themselves are fully guided with video of everything that you're doing as you're doing it.
I see.
There's also audio to go along with it. And then your coach has custom messages that they've recorded for you throughout the workout that are specific not only to you, but also to today's workout. Some might be instructional, some might be motivational, some might be, you know, I might be kind of talking smack to you, like messing with you a little because of the rapport, you know, that we build. But then anyways, when you do that workout, it's all then integrated with your Apple Watch, which we send you if you don't already have one when you sign up. And that allows us to, that's kind of an additional part of that accountability piece, because it allows us to literally see exactly what it is that you've just done. We're able to, you know, in particular, the biggest one is obviously your heart rate graph, but we can see a lot of other activity data. For instance, if you were doing intervals or a bike ride or a run or any of that, we can see distance, pace, elevation. We can see, you know, basically anything that talks to Apple Health Kit. We could see your map, like, you know, where exactly did you run?
Even if you have external sensors that aren't part of the Apple Watch, you know, like GPS you mentioned to show your tracks, or maybe you've got a power meter on your bike, all of that gets fed into the Future system.
So right now it's really, it's largely from the Apple Watch and or anything that talks to Apple Health Kit. But as you can imagine, like we're working on, you know, like we want to build in functionality with Garmin. We want to build in, you know, like a lot of our clients do use Pelotons. And what's interesting with that is what our coaches then do is they make sure that, like, if you say, hey, I love riding my Peloton on Wednesday and Sunday, they put it in your plan and they check in with you before to make sure that you're going to hit that Peloton workout. But then the nice thing is, because, you know, as long as you're wearing your Apple Watch, even though you did the workout through Peloton with their instructor, our coach will get all that activity data, and they're gonna basically hit you up right as soon as you finish and give you some insight on what you just did, or like celebrate, you know, the fact that you just did, or maybe you hit a new PR or things like that. So I think longer term, like the ideal is we can integrate, you know, more formally with some of these other platforms, because it's a way to complement what our clients are doing.
Makes sense. And so it sounds like there's a lot of touch points actually that the coach has with the client that may not be even possible in the real world. Like if you're in the real world, maybe you meet for an hour once a week or whatever. And so all of these touch points, seem like they're really the opportunity to make this magical experience, celebrate the wins, do the check-ins, and kind of build the deeper relationship. But I wonder, like from the coach side, it seems like it could take, quite a bit of programming and training to understand how to be a coach in this new environment. So I wonder, are the people who are coaching, are they people who would already have a coaching practice in a traditional sense, and then they kind of get trained up on how to be a coach in this setting? Or sort of, do you train people newly, or do they come from a different background?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think it's close to 80% of our coaches actually have coached like high level college or professional or Olympic athletes. But even with a lot of those, it's their experience isn't exclusive to those populations. They've also, and you find this, part of the way that you get there in the first place is you do extensive work across a lot of different areas of quote unquote general population. And that's one of the reasons we've probably indexed, a bit heavily on that side in terms of our coaches, just because they're so well-rounded. They're so kind of knowledgeable and experienced to be able to adapt to anyone at any level and sort of meet them, where they're at. And kind of going along with that, 60% of our coaches have their master's degree. All of our coaches have a bachelor's degree of some form, but like I think it's 97% are like exercise science or something else. We have like one or two coaches where they did an undergrad in, say, like business, but then they have like 10 different nutrition and training certs. So they've all come from these backgrounds, working in person at a very high level. And then to your point, the biggest thing that we do is, and it's a credit to, like I was talking about earlier, really the last year and a half in particular of really building the infrastructure to support us in being able to scale. And a big part of that is our new coach onboarding. And really that first month in particular for all of our new coaches is incredibly intensive. And it's interesting because like one of our coaches who just joined with us earlier this month, he was actually previously, he was the head strength coach for the Chicago Bulls for 3 years. In addition to that, he spent like 4 seasons as the assistant with the Milwaukee Bucks. So like high level coach. But even for him, it's like he has to relearn a lot of things because it's, a lot of the tools and technology for how we build programs for our clients, the software that we use has all been built from the ground up in-house, by our engineers. But the nice thing about it is our engineers have built it with us as coaches, like sitting there right next to them, and helping to build the roadmap. And I think us as coaches know Asana way better than ever.
I'm trying to imagine on the coaching team. So are you sitting there like in front of a webcam recording these video messages? And you're sort of tutorialized, like, now give a positive reinforcement. Now give me another rep. Like, do you have sort of scripts and stuff that you assemble to help?
Oh, no scripts.
Oh, no. Okay.
And I think that's the thing too. It's both with like actually putting together your workouts, because there are, and like very good brands, very successful brands where like, if I come on as a coach or trainer, I'm going to learn this brand's form of, programming. And I think what that does is it's consistent, it's repeatable, but it's not going to hit everyone where they're at. You know what I mean? It's versus what we look for is more, let's provide all the tools. Let's educate our coaches. Let's give them more tools to their toolbox and understand, when and where to use these tools. And then within that, and this is something we steal, especially from really good book is Setting the Table, which is Danny Meyer, who's founder, CEO, all that of Union Hospitality Group. So like 11 Madison Park, Shake Shack, all of that is all his stuff. Yeah. But you know, one of the things he talks about is giving your people riverbanks. And so that's kind of more where we'll focus our time in terms of, say, our playbooks and stuff like that is, you know, yes, there's a lot of different quote unquote archetypes of people and or goals and or, you know, whatever. And so to an extent, you can bucket people in different categories. But at the end of the day, I think one of the things we're really big on is this idea of N equals 1. So as much as you want to maybe think about generalizing things, there's pieces that you can generalize, but ultimately you have to bring it to this like N equals 1. And so where I think our playbooks are built and refined to help our coaches is to provide those riverbanks, to say like, hey, here are some common example, maybe like archetypes or personality types. Here are some common goals. Here are some common situations that may come up. Some challenging, some exciting, some, you know, and everywhere in between. And thinking about like in this moment, what is that other person, you know, likely feeling? You know, in you know what, or here's like a few different things that they could be feeling, you know, and not necessarily they are, but at least first that challenge that guides you to like think about, does that make sense? Does this apply? Does this click here? And then from there, how would we want to think about like, how would we want to make this person feel in this moment? Yeah. Like what is the experience that we would want to kind of create or design here? And, you know, from there, you as the coach know that other, or you should at least know that other person. You know your client better than any of us, you know, anybody else will. You have your own personality style. You have your own experience and toolbox. So if you understand those two things, like just go be creative. If you have an idea for how you can create this experience for them or how you can make them feel, whether it's supported, celebrated, whatever it is, just get creative and do it. And then also after you do it, we're going to shine a spotlight on that internally and be like, hey, you got to get up in front of our coaching team and talk about this example so the rest of us can learn from it. And now that's another tool in our toolbox. But then with that playbook as well, there's going to be situations where maybe some of our coaches have never faced that before and they're stuck. So beyond the fact that like we have incredible support internally of other coaches are just going to jump on board and like help out, even though it's not their client, in our playbooks as well, which kind of can come up in our tools, as you would imagine. We can give you almost a ladder of options. It's like, if you're not sure what to do here, here are some ideas that we found over time to be really effective to support this other person.
So that's really nice feedback loop that you get of everybody learning and sharing back that knowledge to make each other's practice a lot better.
What sorts of things I was going to ask, like, what sorts of things have come up as surprising or like particularly useful and creative that your coaches have done? Does anything stick out in your head?
Man, that's such a hard question because there's like so many things, you know. So I'm trying to kind of like hone in on, you know, what are all the different ones. I mean, like we've had coaches do stuff just like they've had, you know, say clients who like, you know, maybe they're getting married or whatever, and they're like super thoughtful of like going out of their way and like sending them a gift and, you know, just like things like that. There's, you know, different strategies where like two separate coaches will find out that their clients happen to know each other. And so just like unprompted, they'll put together a workout where like it's for both the clients and then they each contribute.
Oh, that's so cool.
But I think like, you know, a lot of the stuff too is like, and this is the challenge I think for us as coaches is like, some of the things that you do when you're in person with that client, you just like, you don't even think about it. You just do it. And so how do you replace some of those things? So as an example, like if I were coaching either one of you or both of you together and we spent an hour and we were working out, we wouldn't spend that hour just transactionally talking about the workout and me like being like, okay, now in this next movement, like think about, this for technique. If we did, like, you probably wouldn't train with me for that long. It'd be really boring. It wouldn't, the majority of the time you're like filling the blanks. You're just talking about life, or you're joking around back and forth, or, I'm getting to know like what you have coming up. And so it's interesting because like a lot of our coaches have gotten really creative of like filling in some of those gaps. So maybe you have a 30-second plank, and one of our coaches will like the audio that they leave for you on that plank will just be them like giving a monologue, just like messing with you, or like, kind of that small talk that, you would have in person. So it's just interesting, like all the different ways. And to your point earlier, David, I think what's been really cool that, even before I joined, I wouldn't have necessarily anticipated, but now being here, it makes sense. The relationships that our coaches are making with their clients, I think, are so much more powerful and so much stronger than the relationships that were happening in person. And the reason for that is like, we're literally in your life every single day. So it's like 7 days a week, you're talking to a lot of our, like they're talking to their coach more than they talk to like their friends or family or, whatever, versus that in-person experience. We're physically together, but then like it starts and ends with that hour. And when that hour is up, you go about your life, and then I go to the next, training session, and then we'll recap a week or two later, and it's like, fill me in on everything that's happened in the last 2 weeks in your life. Whereas this, like, in real time, I know everything, that's happening. And then you're planning.
You actually get probably stronger relationships from that. I wonder, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I feel like a lot of people who do probably personal training, it's very much like transactional in real life, like an hour and then off. But really almost what you're recreating is this feeling of being on like a college or high school or club team where like it's really like your coaches become your mentors and you're tapping into that emotional experience. Unless unless you've been on a sports team or in a very kind of high frequency in real life workout experience, you're missing that's like so much a part of psychology. Stick with it.
I think it's really interesting because it's so much more. And I think publicly, people see in all these different, fitness brands or workouts out there, people see it as just that, like, oh, it's just and they're evaluating that. Whereas in reality, and again, this is why it works at such a high level for when you look at like elite athletes, is because there's so much psychology and connection that goes into it. And there's so much like the power of the art of coaching and getting to know that other person and like being able to support them and pick them up when they're down, which you can only do if you genuinely know them, you genuinely like take an interest in them. It's interesting. Like I've started sharing a lot of different like threads now on Twitter, because it's like a lot of stuff that I think people don't inherently think about, but it's like in my, 7 years at Purdue and 4 years with the Bulls, at the end of the day, the X's and O's of the programming that we did, like you could interchange that and it'd probably be fine. You can tweak that around. The reason it was successful was because the underlying foundation of the relationships that we had and how we tap into different things. Like I just did one last week on imposter syndrome. And that's something like, believe it or not, like these crazy high level, like professional athletes, they battle this, and like it impacts their confidence. It impacts, which then in turn impacts like their stress hormones and, how they're sleeping, how they're eating, how they're like all these different things. So it's interesting because it's like, yeah, like we're like working out, you know, like doing squats or bench press or whatever. But then the bulk of our time, like I'm spending hours and hours and hours coaching guys to like overcome some of these things. Or then like I did one today on the placebo effect. And that's a big one. It's like you get people to like believe and sort of trust in something that it's working. And it's like whether that thing itself worked or not, you see this massively, you know, positive impact from it. And I think that's, again, that's the piece. That's why we live in this world where for 80% of the population, nothing works. And it's because they haven't had the benefit and the value of having another person, you know, not just someone, but like someone who's actually an expert who understands all of these things and can tap into them, and they genuinely care about you. They genuinely give a crap about you. You know what I mean? So that's, I think that's what, like, you know, I know me personally, I'm so excited about is like bringing that piece, which, you know, it's funny because everybody focuses on like the working out, but it's so much more the, like the psychological.
Like,
and I want,
is that what attracted you to this? Like, I'm also curious about how you made the jump from, you know, being in these